Hey everybody, TacticAngel here, back on the PlayStation 5 for another ship review in World of Warships Legends. Today we'll be talking about the Tier 6 Premium Italian Heavy Cruiser, Gorizia. For this review, we'll start with my analysis, talk about your commanders, look over the stats, and get into some gameplay. If you do want to jump around, there are time codes in the description, as well as a link to my video on the ship's history. Gorizia enters World of Warships Legends as the second Tier 6 Italian premium cruiser. She offers a little more of the traditional cruiser experience, mixed with some extraordinary capabilities and more than a few pronounced vulnerabilities. The ship is likely to be more popular than the Abruzzi, but she's still a bit of a hard sell. So when looking at strengths, folks familiar with the Italian style of play will not be surprised to hear that the Gorizia is very stealthy, and can get some pretty ridiculous sea detectability if you really want one. She also has very high maneuverability, having both a good top speed and tight turning circle. This means she can be quite dodgy at long range, and she can choose her fights against virtually all cruisers and battleships that she will face. That's not really surprising since this is a Zara-class ship, and the tech tree Italian cruiser can also say most of those things, even if the Gorizia does have a small speed advantage over the basic Zara. She gets two other advantages that are more specifically to her: access to a sonar consumable, while also getting a choice between smoke and defensive fire AA. That's kind of neat, but people will probably be drawn to her more for her superb shell grouping, even at very long ranges for a Tier 6 cruiser. And while my personal opinions do echo the strengths that Wargaming has listed here for Gorizia, I also have a list of downsides. It's actually a fairly short list, but they really are quite pronounced and limit the way that the Gorizia is likely to be played. The extremely long reload on Gorizia is going to make every shot that you take really matter. Your lack of torpedoes are going to really limit your ability to control the battlefield and to actually actively engage in taking caps sometimes. And of course, though there aren't a whole lot of really tough Tier 6 cruisers out there, the Gorizia is definitely one of the more yeetable cruisers sailing around at Tier 6. The players I expect who will like this ship most are probably people who would enjoy something like a New Orleans or Indianapolis, actually, but wouldn't mind trading some DPM and most of their AA defense for extra stealth, speed, and range. For folks who enjoy playing Russian cruisers at obscenely long ranges, because in that case, Gorizia definitely has the greatest potential, not only for long range encounters at Tier 6, but also she has a pretty solid chance of actually hitting something because of that accuracy and muzzle velocity. For better or worse, I think most other folks probably will find this ship thoroughly underwhelming, if not overtly frustrating. As we go to commanders, it's worth mentioning that all of these commanders will, to different degrees, offer damage reduction to your ship, which is certainly helpful, but none of them are really perceptibly head and shoulders above the rest. So with that, we'll first come to the offensive commander, Sanzanetti. The traditional way of thinking about cruiser damage is to improve fire chance and kind of let it happen through attrition. While Sanzanetti offers the highest potential fire chance, the Gorizia has a relatively low potential for fire, due almost entirely to its very slow rate of fire. So it may not be the best use of its potential. You have a couple of different ways of improving your AP, which is probably a bit more of a reliable way to improve your gun performance. This is probably going to be in your third slot choice, and it's going to be a give and take because punching through will definitely let you punch a few more battleships at ranges where you generally don't want to be, and the value of subtle manipulations remains a little bit elusive, as it does tend to mean you're robbing yourself of spike damage from citadels in a hope of getting consistently higher damage to extremities or superstructure. So if you want to use Sanzanetti, you're going to have to choose how that's going to work for you. Though you'd be working with pretty limited offensive abilities, Mimbelli is probably the most comfortable choice for playing an Italian cruiser. Honestly, improving the rate of fire on this ship probably helps it more than a lot of other specific skills you can take, so it's worth mentioning that his base trait here is very useful. After that, you're probably looking at him for speed and rudder shift. Though you won't have the same sort of obscenely long ranges you can achieve with Sanzanetti, the ship can be very dodgy with this sort of build, and you can also get and will most likely need improved turret rotation. This also grants you an indicator about how many people are targeting you. Ideally, that number is between 0 and 1, but the turret rotation is really quite useful, as Gorizia can already outturn its guns pretty easily, and the combination of abilities here makes the Gorizia probably the most effortless to play. Your final choice here is Campione, the Italian base commander. Like other Italian cruisers, he is actually a very attractive option, if only for the obscene amounts of stealth that he can offer to a ship. With a full stealth build, you can actually end up with sub 8 km sea detectability, and that alone is enough to make him interesting because of how little Italian cruisers tend to benefit from the other sorts of things that are in the game. He also offers you some benefits around the edges like speed and fire chance, maybe a few hundred meters of extra range. Like listed above, none of these choices are fantastic, but the ability to take Unstoppable on an Italian cruiser should not be overlooked, since Italian cruisers tend to have fairly fragile rudders and engines. Now jumping into stats, everything that you're going to see on screen are base statistics before any commander abilities are applied. We will make plenty of comparisons to Zara probably along the way, and with that, let's just jump into it. Starting with survivability, the Gorizia is reasonably healthy with 37,000 hit points. Its armor values also look pretty decent here, from 13 to 150 millimeters of armor. Looking at the armor though, everything that's blue, green, or yellow is going to take HE damage from virtually everything. If you're colorblind, you can potentially splash damage from your turrets, your conning tower, and if you're hit directly on the main belt. That main belt is the outside of your citadel, by the way. The bow is 16 millimeters, so it can bounce 8-inch cruiser gunfire if you're pointed right at it, but will get overmatched by pretty much everything above that. The reason why Gorizia tends to be pretty vulnerable to damage is because your citadel is basically a big box that sits above the waterline. Battleship shells can punch straight through the nose of your ship to your citadel, same with the back of the ship too. And if that's angled well enough to bounce, then the side of your ship is subject to penetration. So in short, she has enough armor to ensure that a battleship can penetrate to and arm a shell on your citadel, and she's thick enough in just about every way to guarantee that it's going to hurt. That's probably going to encourage you to play from a distance where battleships either can't reliably hit you or you have enough time to just dodge. If you buy into rudder shift rather than stealth, it's reasonably possible to do that in this ship. Last but not least, if you do get hit by a torpedo, you have 19% damage reduction, which will probably not make you feel happy about that, but it is pretty good for a tier 6 cruiser. The Gorizia has the same sort of arrangement of 4x2 203mm artillery that you find on the Zara. The differences here is that you get 15 seconds of reload rather than 14.5 that you find on the Tech Tree ship. But you trade this for an extra kilometer of range. Though I think it's kind of a questionable choice due to your very good concealment, this 15.6 kilometer range makes her a very enticing choice to play at extreme distances, since it is both best range at the tier currently and competitive even with tier 7 cruisers. There are two hidden characteristics of these guns that make them a little bit better than they seem on this screen, and that is that they have good shell velocity and also they are incredibly accurate. Unfortunately for Gorizia, everything else that you can see on screen has all the appearances of a disaster. Zara is already not a well-liked ship, and adding an extra half second to its reload means that she comes in with the second worst AP damage per minute and the second worst HE damage per minute as well, both behind the Cheshire, which also isn't exactly a well-loved and wildly popular ship. She is also absolute dead last in worst fire starter among tier 6 cruisers, owing to the relatively unimpressive 14% fire chance, slow reload, and only having 8 guns. For what it's worth though, you do have very good secondaries, I guess, for a cruiser, but everything else on this ship should probably convince you that being up close is not exactly where you want to be. One of those reasons is torpedoes, and it's worth noting, just for the record, that you don't have them. Anti-aircraft, back to another defensive statistic. Though you do have access to DFAA without having to drop sonar, the Gorizia's base AA statistics are really pretty catastrophic. There's only one cruiser rated worse than this ship, and there are 4 destroyers rated better than you. And with just 91 damage per second, The short story is, you're kind of in the area of a Tier 6 American destroyer, with the exception of the Kid, which is quite a bit better than you. Compared to other cruisers, if you choose to use DFAA rather than smoke, then when you do press the button and double your damage per second, you very nearly have average damage for Tier 6 cruiser. For dedicated carriers out there, Gorizia is likely going to be in the easy pickings territory, and even with DFAA, it is not wildly dangerous. As far as how Gorizia moves, 33 knots is pretty much what you'd expect from a Tier 6 cruiser. She does have a very tight turning circle at 580 meters, and her 9.8 second rudder is definitely slow unless you want to go all in with your commander skills and equipment. Maybe an easy way to describe this is it's exactly the same in the Zara, but you have 1 knot of extra speed. But you may not want to go all in on rudder because you do have a very good concealment. Its base concealment is, in fact, 100 meters worse than the Abruzzi, which is the stealthiest cruiser at the tier. Boosting this stat can allow you to comfortably move around the map with sea detectability that is actually below 8 kilometers in range. And a nice statistic here is the 6 kilometers while firing from smoke. That is actually a little bit less than average, and since you do have a smoke screen, it will come up. Consumables are a little interesting on Gorizia. Skipping over the standard damage control, we've got access in the first slot to either defensive fire AA or a smoke screen. For my money, I would want to take the smoke screen, as it will protect you as you do the pro gamer turns at mid-range or disengage at longer ranges. In short, it offers you a bit more flexibility and covers up some mistakes. DFAA is definitely going to improve your protection from aircraft carriers, but it's really only going to take you to the point where you have average cruiser AA at the tier. And this consumable is really only useful if you're facing a carrier, plus smoke also hides you from planes too, and you do have 2 other consumables, one of which is a fighter, and that's at least going to give you a decent amount of protection versus air attacks. It will also allow you to see a little bit out of your own smoke, and occasionally, though right now fairly rarely, over islands. You also have sonar, which is a separate slot than your DFAA and smoke, which is a bit unique. The sonar in Gorizia in Legends is really nothing special. If you're familiar with this ship from PC, it has incredible sonar there. That is currently not the case here, but it's still nice to have in addition to smoke and a plane. Alright, and with all that out of the way, we're going to go ahead, get into some gameplay. We're going to be on Greece. As the battle gets going, I will go ahead, put my commander up on the screen. We're using Sanzanetti. This is when I was kind of testing out whether I liked subtle manipulations better or punching through. I think I like punching through better, but subtle manipulations also has its place. You just tend to be pretty good at cruisers as opposed to any threat to battleships for the most part. In any case, the other choices that we have here, we're obviously trying to increase our rate of fire with refill station. We also have a good amount of stealth, and that is creating, actually, if you look at the map, just a ridiculous difference between my maximum range and the sea detectability of this boat. One reason why Sanzanetti for me feels a little bit weird is because when you end up with this sort of difference, then range kind of actually is hurting you. And where that would happen is in a situation where you defeat one enemy and the second enemy would normally be outside of your range, or if you're shooting at an enemy and you pop behind an island that would normally block vision to the only person who can see you, sometimes you're getting spotted from further away then, which I don't like, but other people seem to be okay with. Anyway, back to the game. I'm trying to fire in on this York. We're getting pretty close to that battleship, so we're going to start paying attention to where we're driving so we don't run into anybody. Now we are not spotted currently, and we're going to continue moving around the battlefield at a nice clip. You can see we're already above 33 knots, which is the listed maximum speed. That's because of the speed flag, but the straight line ability of this ship to get around is pretty impressive, and I like it quite a bit. And in this case, because I am running so much concealment at 8.5 kilometers, this is going to allow me to try to play as a flanker and exploit targets when they make themselves available to me. Now this York I'm a little bit apprehensive about shooting. York has a pretty decent turtleback. It's not real clear to me that I'm at a far enough distance to actually get plunging fire down into a citadel. So I kind of want to make sure he is not looking at me before I start shooting at him. Now he puts some shells out there, and lo and behold, we are actually at a pretty good range to punch him. We do a nice big chunk of damage. That makes us feel pretty confident that that next salvo is probably going to take him out. And you know what they say, cool guys don't look at explosions. But we're waiting. We're waiting, and actually a little curious about what happened to that guy. Apparently missed his death show up on the left-hand side of the screen, and he was killed by someone other than me. Major not action hero moment there. Not feeling quite as cool, but we'll get over it. We're pushing on this flank. This is not a real solid thing for me to be doing. The Trento, obviously, another Italian cruiser, has torpedoes. That makes going in between these two islands a little bit crazy. And this is a realization I have right about now. So I'm turning out. We're going to go ahead and continue to contest. Looking at the mini-map, if we get around this island, we should have some broadsides. Now at this short range, subtle manipulations against a cruiser is probably very useful, because reducing the amount of time it takes for the AP to arm is going to hopefully cause that shell to explode inside of the enemy ship instead of on the other side of it. We're starting up our hydro just to make sure we're safe. We get a whole bunch of overpens, which is at close range actually kind of standard for this. My aim was a little bit high on that Trento, and now we're looking at this other one. Again, aim's a little bit high, but a couple of the shells trend low. We get a whole bunch of overpens and one citadel. This ship is reasonably good at scoring citadels against other cruisers. You can do it, particularly with punching through, against more lightly armored battleships, the Nelson, and pretty much anything that's Russian up close. These are at like suicidally close ranges, by the way, so I wouldn't recommend it, but if you're inside of 6 kilometers, you can definitely do both of those. You can even get Vladivostok pretty easily. So they're interesting punchy guns. They are prone to some over penetrations, particularly at close range because of their high velocity, and some people aren't going to like that. But really, as much as I like to be up close and personal in all of these games, this is one of the ships that probably benefits from being at least 10 to 15 kilometers away from folks. Now at this point you may be wondering what I'm doing. I have the big brain idea that I want to get outside to create some crossfire. There is one destroyer over there that could throw a wrench into this plan. But you can see with the ultra low sea detectability, 14 kilometers, nothing's going to get spotted from there. But you can imagine if that guy was 10 kilometers away, and he's certainly sailing towards that, it would be nice to have this kind of stealth. One of the minor advantages to this sort of playstyle is that you can also spot for your team. I'm not sure which ones of those ships can actually be seen by everybody on my team. My sense is probably not all of them, but if I'm just hanging out over here playing the boat watching game, then my team can still fire at all of these guys. Now, even I get a little bored of the boat watching game from time to time. So we start taking some shots at the Surrey. It looked like everybody had their guns turned in the other direction, and that continues to be the case. That is going to make sure that I don't start bleeding hit points. It looks like the Andre Doria is not going to have this. He sees what I'm doing, and for whatever reason he wants to come over here. So we're just going to go ahead, pop that smoke, and use that to disengage. They're well outside of the 6 kilometers of our main battery detectability while firing in smoke, so we do continue to put some shells in there. We're trying to slow down to get, maybe 1 or 2 more shots while we're still in the comfort of the smoke. We switch over to AP. We don't get really rewarded very much with that. And now we're back out of the smoke. We're going to go ahead and do the opposite turn to get us back into some sort of range against the enemy ships. And we're back to watching boats for a while. This is one of the things I think that you do end up doing in this ship if you're playing for your team. You can run around and just shoot anything you want. If that's how you want to play, you're probably going to draw a lot of attention to yourself, so I probably wouldn't do that. But sometimes I can be patient. Now this Surrey is a little bit annoying because I feel like I should have hit him earlier. And there we go. That's quite a bit better. Didn't get a lot of hits, but you can see we're consistently getting good shell groupings. The Gorizia is going to definitely play nicely for folks who actually do have a really solid sense of how to aim in this game. That is not always me. Unfortunately, we don't have our smoke at this point, but the enemy destroyer has smoked himself. So I'm going to do a little bit of a turn back, and if I really wanted to, I could probably ride the smoke all the way in to my sonar range. Again, because of that excellent sea detectability. Hopefully the torpedoes, if there are any, are already on their way. We are now to the point where we've almost got the man inside of hydro range, which is kind of the whole point of what I'm doing. Somebody else takes advantage of our spot and does finish him off. We need to get going here, so we're going to start turning hard here. I would much rather take some shots from the Surrey than the Caracciolo. You can see it's a battleship. He's going to punch me through the back. A lot of what you're going to need to do is not let that happen. You can try to not let it happen by being extra dodgy, or you can try to not let it happen by being extra stealthy. I prefer stealthy to dodgy, but results may vary. That's some of the sort of disappointing things that typically happen in the Gorizia when you're firing at a battleship at long range. I'm not sure how 4 overpens and 1 penetration managed to be 1700 damage, but I am not a mathematician. So we continue to pursue the Surrey over here. He's going to be coming around this island, it looks like, so we're going to let him do that. We've still got our plane up in the air, so hoping to get a spot over the island. We don't quite get that. We do manage to get him right as he appears from the other side, and we go on to win the game. So nothing super special there. This is a good indication of, I think, what you're supposed to be doing with this particular ship. So we'll just jump into my final thoughts on Gorizia. And the truth is, I probably don't have all that much more to say about it, other than it's best to go into this ship thinking about it as a faster, stealthier Indianapolis. In that case, the way that you can get deleted in this game is not going to be surprising to you. Being faster and stealthier, pretty easy to wrap your head around. Where that analogy kind of falls down is that I still think the guns on the Indianapolis are quite a bit better than this, but you do get extra range. These are super accurate, and the only downside there is the extremely long reload. Hitting things at range is a real strength for this ship. Pushing objectives, not so much. I enjoyed playing the ship because it was a little bit of a learning process, but with the penetration falling off as much as it does at range, and being pretty unusable up close does kind of make it an odd duck that actually isn't as bad as some of its stats make it look, because its strengths are basically those hidden stats that we have in the game. But it's also kind of hard to sing the praises for it, because at the end of the day, Gorizia is just okay, and it's really only going to be just okay in the narrow band of players who really know how to play it. So, I don't know. It's fine, it's a little different, but not really, and you'll have to be careful when using it. In any case, those are my thoughts on Gorizia. I hope you have enjoyed this little video. Make sure to check out the ship's history in the video linked in the description, and as always, I hope to see you on the next one.